As Abhayanandi said, we're going to we're going to have a series of talks about the Buddha's life story and we titled this retreat, The Noble Quest. And so the two things the two sort of ideas that are going to frame our story are the sort of myth and the quest. So part of the Buddha's life story is probable fact, and part of it is more mythic. So a myth, the thing about myths are they're stories that reveal the deeper truths of life. So they're not just about facts. They're more nuanced. And so an example of a myth that you're probably all familiar with is the Greek myth of Narcissus, and that tells a story of a young man who becomes so captivated by his own reflection that he ends up wasting away at the water's edge. And there are many things that have come from that. Many psychological problems are named after Narcissus. But it's a story not just about vanity, it also invites us to reflect on loneliness, on the frustration and emptiness of self-obsession. So when we explore the Buddha's story, we engage with it on this level, on thinking about the meaning behind the events and how they relate to our lives. And a quest. So what is a quest? And a quest is a journey in search of something meaningful. So whether we realize it or not, all of us are on a quest. So we're all looking for answers, for fulfillment, for purpose. And sometimes we don't quite know what that quest is, or we set off on what the Buddha would call the ignoble quest. And I feel like when I was younger, I had a definite quest. So a little bit of my story was that I was born to young and adventurous parents. And when I was about 6, they bought a farm in the middle of nowhere, and there were no schools close to the farm. So I ended up going to boarding school, and I was about 7 actually when I went to school, not 6. But it wasn't a it was just a bit rubbish, really. I think there was just no kindness. I think there was emotional neglect and just no kindness in the school. So I used to go home once a month for a weekend, and I remember that feeling of like so looking forward to going home on a Friday night. I was really looking forward to Friday night. Saturday was wonderful. Sunday I would wake up with this pit in my stomach because I'd have to go back to school on Sunday afternoon. And what formulated in my mind was this idea that one day I would grow up and I would find my partner, and then I would get to stay home in this happy place. So I think that was the beginning of my quest for the perfect partner that was going to provide me with my safe, happy place. And I pursued this quest with great diligence. I sort of thought, my partner will like somebody who's educated. So, I got myself educated, but I didn't find my partner there. So then I thought, maybe traveling. My partner will like somebody who's been well-traveled. So I went traveling. I didn't find my partner there. I thought maybe I would find him if I pursued a career. I tried that. That didn't work either. This partner that was going to fix my life didn't appear then either. So Yeah. And then in the midst of this, actually at some point I did start coming to the Buddhist Center. So when I first came, I was very much interested just in meditation. I wasn't particularly interested in Buddhism, just meditation. And then what happened was my mum got ill, and she got terminally ill, actually. So I ended up going back to South Africa and spending the time, what remained of her life, with her and my dad. And it was actually, given the circumstances, it was actually a really positive time for me, because I think it was quite healing, spending that time with my parents. But also, I saw through, when my mum died, I saw the limitations of my quest, my romantic myth ideal, that no matter, even if I did find the perfect partner, one day they would leave, even if they didn't choose to, or I would leave. One of us was, is very, very likely to predecease the other. So it was the first time that, I really saw through that myth. Yeah, so for the duration of this retreat, we're going to have, so that was an ignoble quest. That was a quest for something that was never going to provide me with what I was looking for. And for the duration of this retreat, we're going to have the opportunity to reflect on what the Buddha called the noble quest. And that's a quest for meaning and understanding in our lives, the quest for greater awareness of the deeper forces that shape our thoughts and actions, and the quest to discover ways to open our hearts and connect with something greater than ourselves. So in order to do this over the course of the retreat, we're going to look at the life of the Buddha and how it relates to our lives, so that we can see what we can learn from his story. So, roughly, a bit longer than 2,500 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama was born, and he was born to the ruler of the Shakyan clan, and in the town of Kapilavastu, which is the capital of Shakya, and that's it's around northern India. And we're told his mother died a week after he was born, and so he was raised by his father and his aunt. And as we understand, he was well loved. And I imagine, given that we heard his mother died so soon after his birth, that he would have been an only child or an only son. So there would have been a lot of expectation that he would grow up and take over as leader of the, as ruler of the Shakyan clan. So we understand that he was well loved. Part of his training would have included the art of politics and warfare. I've certainly heard a story of him being very good with the bow and arrow. He'd also, there was also the routine of day-to-day life. He was aristocracy, so he won't actually have been involved in a lot of the humdrum of day-to-day life, but there were festivals that he would have gone to, like and one that's mentioned is a ploughing festival. So as well as, and life would have had a very seasonal nature to it. So as well as an all-round good education for his time, he will have lived in absolute luxury. So we're told he had a palace for every season. No doubt he had the best chariot that money could buy. He lived a life of luxury. there was entertainment, there were dancing girls. His life was filled with, his early life was filled with privilege, entertainment, and just everything, like every luxury that money could buy at the time. So, just a pause to see how this might relate. What's significant about this story, and how does it relate to our lives? So firstly, the most important thing, which we've mentioned a couple of times, is that the Buddha was born a human being. That point is stressed over and over again because it's really important that we realize that whatever the Buddha achieved, that's available to us as well. So that's the first point. So then the palace. Oh yes, this talk is titled The Pleasure Palace. So the palace. So first off, the palace is a place. First off, there is the positive about the palace is that it's a place where there is enough. So he's not in survival mode. Like he doesn't have to worry about where he's going to get his next meal. So I was thinking of the palace. It corresponds to our life. We can compare it to our life in the UK at the moment, especially compared to other parts. Well, they're certainly compared to some other parts in the world. I personally quite enjoy reading medieval novels, and definitely. One of the things I quite like about medieval novels is the sort of the background bit. I mean, I quite like the story itself, but there's also the sort of day-to-day bit of it. And actually what you realise is that for most people, life was just a matter of survival. And when you're just in survival mode, you don't have the space or energy to contemplate the more meaningful questions of life. So we're all in a really good position. We're not in survival mode. The other thing I want to draw out is about the palace is it's a place of comfort. So it's a very comfortable life. There's everything he could possibly want. And for most of us, I would say this is probably true of us as well. Like our lives, it's not that our lives are without difficulty, but probably we can maneuver our lives so that they're comfortable. I certainly know that I can. My life is very comfortable. You know, I live in a nice place. I have lovely friends. I've got a job I love. I have a very comfortable life. But the shadow side of comfort is complacency. So we need to stretch ourselves to grow as people. So we need to be willing to take risks, to be prepared to feel anxiety and discomfort. And I think all life needs to grow. We all have it within. We all want to grow. But equally, we want to grow, and we have this urge towards growth, but we don't want discomfort. It's really hard to, step into those positions of anxiety and taking risks, and like feeling uncomfortable is unpleasant. So I was thinking. The thing about growth and taking risks is that we don't really have to take huge steps all at once. So, but if you've heard me give a talk before, forgive the overuse of this example. But I don't think I'm unique in this. Like public speaking is, it's quite an anxiety producing thing to do, but like in my own experience, I didn't just start off like giving a talk to all of you. I started off in a study group and presenting a project. So, you take small steps as I'm presenting a project to about 10 people. And, that was really, really scary at the time. And then after a while, you get a bit used to that. And then, you do it for a few more people or, a few more people, but for a shorter period of time. And then you sort of expand. You expand your capacity for discomfort or for stretching out. But the thing is, the thing about getting used to discomfort, it's not just a personal growth thing. If you're going to follow the Buddhist path or the Buddhist teachings, you need to learn to become your own person and to be able to risk being outside of the group. So when I was, this was actually before I was, it was around this first time when I started calling myself a Buddhist. I was still working in a place where our manager was, our little team found her quite challenging. And our way of bonding was to talk about how challenging she was. It was a definite way that we bonded as a team. And I remember when I first made the decision that I wasn't going to take part in that any longer, it was really uncomfortable. I felt outside of the group and I felt like I'd lost my means of bonding with them. I never actually took the next step of pointing out what she did well. That would have been like next level discomfort. So that's one thing. Or, it might be doing the unconventional thing. So earlier in the retreat, I was speaking to my friend on the team, and she was saying how she had accepted a promotion and then after a year demoted herself. And that's really brave as well. That's also an uncomfortable thing to do. The conventional view is that you work hard, you get promoted, and you keep going. The conventional view is not that you take a step back and go, no, thank you. And then another thing, it's sort of building up that feeling of resilience. If we're going to sustain any sort of meditation practice, it's a much more mundane level, but, warm, comfy bed is very, very appealing. So it requires some resilience and being prepared to experience discomfort, to get into the habit of getting out of bed to meditate every morning. So from a Buddhist perspective, that stepping outside of comfort is an important thing to cultivate. Yeah. So the next aspect I'd like to draw out from the Pleasure Palace is entertainment. So Siddhartha had the finest musicians of his day, and I'm not sure how much other entertainment he had. No doubt there was other entertainment. We have the parallel I'm going to draw with our lives is, just entertainment and distraction. And we have so many things that distract us or have the ability to distract us in our daily lives. There's the internet, there's social media, there's YouTube. They're all wonderful things, but it is really easy to live your life in front of a screen. And I remember being on a tube once and just seeing the whole row of people on their phones. And I just had this little fantasy, like slightly science fiction fantasy, that somewhere there were aliens and they lived on our life force, but we had to give it willingly. So, and the way we gave it was like through these screens. So why is distraction problematic? So The thing with constant distraction is it affects our ability to focus deeply. And from a Buddhist perspective, we need to cultivate that ability to focus deeply. So we need to be able to cultivate the ability to focus in order to develop mindfulness and awareness of our habitual mental patterns. And once we can see our habitual behavior, that opens up the possibility to transform it. So, so I notice one of my habitual mental habits is planning. Often when I sit down to meditate, I go into planning. And just seeing that allows me to reflect on the fact that actually I can't control everything. No matter how much I plan, there are going to be things outside of my control that I'm not able to have any effect on. A more important, that's a very important thing, to be able to see what's going on in our minds and to recognize our habitual tendencies. And but one of the main purposes of meditation in Buddhism is so that we can reflect on the true nature of reality. So you need a certain amount of sustained focus to be able to reflect on things like impermanence, the interconnectedness of all things, and the absence of a fixed self. And without that ability to focus, we're never going to have more than a superficial understanding. In a way, those concepts are easy to understand. But what we're trying to do in meditation is get to a point where our mind is subtle and pliable enough to really reflect deeply on those issues and understand them much, much more, to really understand them. The other thing about being able to focus is that it also strengthens our ability to stay with difficult experiences without being overwhelmed by them. So the last thing I'm going to draw out from the palace is the dancing girls. So I'm going to parallel the dancing girls with craving, desire or wanting, and how that manifests in our lives, and why that might be problematic. So craving manifests in all ways, from some very large to small. So the most extreme manifestation of craving is addiction, which is very painful and causes a lot of suffering to, both to the people who are addicted and to people around them, and it's hard to break out of. And they're the more benign forms of craving, of wanting, a bit like wanting that extra bit of chocolate when we've already had enough. So maybe, and craving, basically craving causes suffering. So I was thinking on this retreat, any form of wanting ultimately creates suffering, even if it's very mild. So I was thinking on the retreat, a very common thing is wanting the person in your room not to snore, wanting a good night's sleep, wanting a good meditation. But all those are actually they're very common on retreat, and we think those are the things that prevent us from being able to practice. But really, they are also the things that we bring to our practice. So from a Buddhist perspective, craving is the the root of all suffering. So dukkha is the word that's used for suffering in Buddhism. And this gets in the way of true joy, happiness, and peace. So essentially, the ways that craving creates suffering is so it arises when we grasp at things that we want. So I was thinking of an example on a typical example for me is I often late at night have this desire to snack on things, and if there's anything sweet, I'll snack on that, and then I won't sleep. and even though I know that, I still do it. So, and then another way it manifests is trying to avoid the things we dislike. And I have an example that was live not so long ago in my life. I used to work at the Mandala Cafe, which is next to the London Buddhist Centre, and it's a fantastic cafe. I'd really recommend you go if you're in the area. And lovely people work there. And it was great working there. Actually, I did really enjoy working there. There was one part of the day I did not enjoy, and that was from 7 to 8, you do the cleaning. 7 to 8 at night, you do the cleaning. And what I noticed was that I'd be tired and I didn't want to do it. And just getting into quite a tight, sort of mental state around it. And then one day I thought, I could just soften around this. I could just stop resisting it. And actually, as soon as I stopped resisting it, it was fine. Actually, it's not so bad, It's like, So a lot of the suffering came in from the resisting it. So they're like trying to avoid the thing I thought I disliked. And then another form of craving is clinging to the idea of how things should be. And I definitely know this one. And it's funny, I couldn't immediately think of an example, actually. I'll probably think of loads of examples tomorrow for how things should be. But I do know that I often admire people who are able to step into a situation where things go wrong through no fault of their own. Like they're in a situation, somebody does something they shouldn't have done, which results in something, and they're just able to step in and go, okay, well, this is what we've got. How do we take it from here? So I think a lot of suffering is caused from clinging to the idea of how things should be. So this constant wanting or resisting leads to pain and dukkha. And is what the Buddha said underpinned all our suffering, craving of one form or another, either wanting or not wanting. Okay, so that's all I'm going to draw out from the palace, but the story continues. So as Siddhartha's going about his life in the palace, we're told that he goes along with his charioteer and he goes into the city of Kapilavastu, and he sees an old person. And how I imagine this is that actually he has seen old people. It's possibly not the first time he's actually encountered an old person. But something has happened, and it's as though he really sees an old person for the first time. So I imagine he sees this person that's bent over, wrinkled, maybe has no teeth, very arthritic. And he has this realization of what is going on. Like, wow, this is going to happen to me. like, I too am going to get old. And he's a bit horrified by this. So he speaks to his companions and he's like, oh my gosh, what is the point of all this if we're just going to get old? And then the story continues that the next time he goes out, he sees somebody who's ill. And again, it's as though he sees this for the first time. Probably in India it's much more visible, I imagine. And again, he's horrified. And then finally, he sees a corpse. And there's this sense of, why am I going about my day-to-day life when it's all going to end in death? So it's as though, I imagine it's as though up until this point, it's almost as though he's been imprisoned in this palace of comfort and joy and pleasure. And it's as though he's let out for the first time and he sees the realities of life, like he's been protected from this up until now. And I imagine that up until now, he probably spent his life training to become the next ruler of the clan, of the region, presumably going on with his day-to-day activities and not really thinking any further than that. And then now, he just sees the pointlessness of it all. It's like, what's the point of putting in all this work, all this effort, if it's just going to result in death? So he's plunged into this, into sort of an existential despair. And then some time passes and he sees what is called the fourth sight. So he sees a holy man. And a holy man is somebody, they will have been quite common in the area at the time. There have been people who have renounced possessions, status and caste. People who, would have gone about doing good actions and, cultivated compassion for living beings. And this seeing the fourth sight also brings about a realization. He has the strong intuition that this is where the answer lies. The answer doesn't lie in becoming the next ruler of the region. The answer lies in following this holy man, following like something about the holy man. The answer is in that. The answer is in that. Yeah. So so my experience was, in a sense, I was going to say not dissimilar to Siddhartha's, but actually very dissimilar. Not like his at all, really. But but my mum dying was actually, that was quite a transitional time for me. I think it was the first time I really, really took in that that I was going to die and that the people I loved were going to die as well. And I did have regrets, actually. I really wished I had spent more time with her. I wish I'd been in better contact with her. So, so that was a really big turning point in my life. And I suppose, I suppose one could say that the Buddhist Centre, the London Buddhist Centre, was my fourth sight. This was my realization that actually, having come into contact with Buddhism really did make me think that I wasn't happy with the trajectory that my life was going on, and I wanted to live my life differently, and that this could be a way of doing that. So so the story so far, so I'm going to end the story with the Buddha's seeing of the fourth sight, and leave you with that cliffhanger to see what he does next, which will be taken up by Maitra Kumara tomorrow night, who will continue the story. So just to sum up from the story so far is, just the main points are that, in a sense, the Buddha had very, although in a different time and different era, not totally, our conditions are not that different from his. Like, we live in, extreme luxury. We have a lot of comfort. We have a lot of distraction. We have, we really have to make an effort to work against the tendency for complacency and for scattered, dissipated focus. But we also, we are subject to old age, sickness and death. And in coming on this retreat, you could say that we have come into contact with the fourth sight. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.